Hello, welcome to another episode of Watchtower Examination. I begin by reading for you from the book Crisis of Conscience, pages 295 to 296. When attending district assemblies in Alabama, we had previously met and become acquainted with a witness named Peter Gregerson. Later, he had invited us to visit Gadsden, Alabama, on a couple of occasions so I could speak to the local congregations. Peter had developed a small chain of supermarkets in the Alabama-Georgia area. In 1978, when a zone trip took my wife and me as far as Israel, Peter and his wife joined us there, and we spent parts of 2 weeks touring that Bible land. At that time, Peter expressed serious concern about the effects the 1975 predictions had had. He said he thought it would be a grave error if the society pushed strongly on their 1914 date. That the disillusionment resulting from 1975 would be nothing compared to what would come if the society was forced to move away from that 1914 chronology. I acknowledged his assessment as undoubtedly correct, but we went no further into the matter. When Peter learned of our proposed leave of absence, he urged us to spend some time with them and fixed up a mobile home belonging to one of his sons for us to stay in. He offered to let me do yard work on his property to help cover some of our expenses and at the same time get some of the vigorous exercise that had been medically recommended for me at a recent physical exam. Peter's father had become one of Jehovah's Witnesses when Peter was a small child, and from about the age of 4, he had been taken by his parents to meetings. As a young man, he had become a full-time pioneer, and even after marriage and the arrival of his first child, he had struggled to keep on in that full-time activity, doing janitorial work for income. He had been sent by the society into problem areas of Illinois and Iowa to help solve difficulties and build up certain congregations. In 1976, he was one of a representative group of elders invited to Brooklyn for discussions with the governing body. A year or so after this seminar, however, he decided to relinquish his eldership. He had recently turned over the presidency of the grocery company to one of his brothers and had made use of his increased free time to do more Bible study. He was troubled by some of the organization's teachings and wanted to reaffirm his convictions as to their rightness, reestablish his confidence in his lifelong religion. He was then in his early 50s. The result was exactly the opposite. The more he studied the scriptures, the more convinced he became that there were serious errors in the organization's theology. This led to his decision as to seizing his eldership. As he put it in talking with me about it, "I just can't bring myself to stand before people and conduct studies on things that I cannot see have a scriptural backing. I would feel like a hypocrite doing that, and my conscience won't let me do it." Although when first hearing his decision I had encouraged him to reconsider it, I could not deny the validity of his serious questions, and I had to respect his conscientiousness and his distaste for hypocrisy. He had reached his personal crossroads before I reached mine. This was the man that organizational policy later categorized as a wicked man, with whom one should not even eat, and my having a meal with him in a restaurant in 1981 resulted in my trial and banishment from the organization. When Lloyd Evans released his video exposing what he called Bottlegate, a firestorm was created online, chiefly on YouTube. A few persons brought it to my attention before I was able to resume doing videos. I initially could not see the big deal, but when I saw the video, I could not resist giving my take on it. I was not alone. Several former witnesses gave their take on it, and there was one common thread. Like me, all of them indicated there is no big deal in and of itself with Toni Morrison buying whiskey, albeit expensive whiskey. Yup, everyone indicated that. But there were so many problems brought out that it doesn't matter what kind of spin that Watchtower members may try to put on it. There are still major problems. not even the witness that Jesus sent to clear the air.
Maybe Jesus Christ wants me to do this. In fact, he does, no doubt about it.
Could clear the air. First, it was a probability.
Maybe Jesus Christ wants me to do this.
Then it became a certainty.
In fact, he does, no doubt about it.
This gentleman insists that the governing body takes the lead, but they are not leaders.
Body of elders, or that body is governing body. They're body of elders, but they're governing body. They take the lead, they are not leaders. Please, I try to understand that.
And all of this while insisting everyone else is stupid.
You were ignorant. You were an idiot. And you know what? All your apostate friends fell for it because they're stupid. And they're all stuck on stupid. And they can't get over it. They can't get beyond that stupid. I can't fix their stupid.
If this is the typical Watchtower member, then they are in a sad place. I would like to think that he is not.
Maybe Jesus Christ wants me to do this. In fact, he does, no doubt about it.
So now he's positive that Jesus wanted him to do that video, just as he is positive that all speeches given by Tony Morris came from God.
Now, I thank Jehovah for the substance of his talks. All of his talks, the information comes from Jehovah, but he delivers it quite well.
His rant aside, he did ask some questions that witnesses may consider good questions.
Is there anything wrong with buying 6 bottles of whiskey? Or 12 bottles of whiskey?
Maybe not for a religion that allows drinking, but as was pointed out at the Living Now channel,
Tony Morris spent $850 just in whiskey. Whiskey. Something nobody needs to live, right? He spent $850 in whiskey. Okay, we don't know if it was his own money or if it was donation money, meaning your money. But let's say it was his own money. But why didn't he spend $850 for Jehovah's organization instead? Or why didn't he decide to buy cheaper whiskey and give the difference to Jehovah?
Maybe Tony Morris gives him away his gifts at anniversaries and weddings. Maybe when somebody gets baptized. Maybe to celebrate, a 50-year service to Jehovah.
maybe he bought them all for himself. Maybe he is a secret alcoholic. But we do not know. It is not for you to speculate. It is not for me to speculate. It is for Tony Morris to respond for himself. I'll touch on that later.
What about Jesus? Did they ever accuse Jesus of being a drunk?
Do not even go down that road. Do not compare Jesus to Tony Morrison. Jesus was never ever guilty of anything wrong that they accused him of. You cannot say the same thing of Tony Morris. Besides, you are responding to a video by Lloyd Evans in which no such claim was made. Enough of this guy. I only featured him to demonstrate a possible attitude that witnesses might take, including denying the reality of what was shown on video.
Faithful witnesses, the loyal Jehovah's Witnesses, they're not going, even if they do see something like, Aunt Mo in the liquor store, they're going to say, oh, well, that's not really him.
Yeah, they did it with Jeffrey Jackson. Oh, the apostates hired actors that look like, and they're going to say the same thing because they will deny physical evidence is what they will do, because that disturbs their comfort zone that they're living in their brain. Because you got to remember, see, Watchtower has indoctrinated all of us, but see, some of us have left. But see, Watchtower has indoctrinated all of us at one time or another that we are living in a spiritual paradise. See, we have this spiritual brotherhood right now.
That is a profound point that exposes a problem with witnesses. I have had 2 witnesses cut me off totally. Why? Because I asked them questions they refused to answer. Because I demonstrated to them beyond a shadow of a doubt that they belong to a false religion. But rather than face the reality staring them in the face, they would much prefer cut me off, live in denial. Now here you have this gentleman claiming that the video with Tony Morris was photoshopped. But Mike and Kim made an even more profound point. The can of worms continues to be exposed. Mike and Kim brought out an interesting point, that Toni Morrison has a guilty conscience, betrayed by his traveling several miles to get his booze. Clearly, he could not ask someone to get it for him, for that someone would be carrying a secret. But this point made by Mike and Kim was quite thought-provoking.
We were never heavy drinkers, so that's why we were never we weren't part of the Cottonwood congregation, because most of them were heavy drinkers.
As I pointed out in my previous video on Bottlegate, I discovered that witnesses do not have a problem with drinking. Their position is, as long as you do not get drunk, as long as you do it in moderation, it is quite fine. But this video production from the Watchtower flat out rejects it. It doesn't say have a little for your stomach's sake. It doesn't say drink but make sure you do not get drunk. No.
What would you do if someone pressures you to drink? At Romans 6:16, the Bible indicates that when you let others control your decisions, you become their slave. You could just follow along and let your peers rule your life. Or you could give a firm response, perhaps something like, no thanks, or sorry, I'm not into that.
Why is the Watchtower producing a video telling people not to drink when a member of the governing body is out on a Sunday morning buying expensive whiskey? The man who did the video defending Morris raised the question whether this was actually a Sunday morning at 11. I have no reason to doubt Lloyd Evans is speaking the truth on this. But that brings out something interesting too. After doing the first video, a very conscientious friend, an ex-JW, contacted me to inform me of something I forgot. So, well, more like he reminded me. Because there was this strange Sunday morning when I saw witnesses in my community doing their witnessing work. It was rather strange. All my life, I'm used to them doing this in the afternoon after attending meetings in the morning. So I asked, and they told me that they've had a change. They are now doing the meetings in the evening, and so they do their witnessing activity in the morning. That still puts Tony Morris in a pickle, even if I absolve him of the possibility of missing a meeting. You see, witnesses, their entire Sunday is used up for Watchtower activity. Worship in the morning, canvassing in the evening, or vice versa. So if Toni Morrison was not in a meeting, should he not be witnessing?
Growing up personally as a Jehovah's Witness, I was taught the importance of informal witnessing. Informal witnessing, according to jw.org, is sharing the good news with people whom we meet in our daily activities, when traveling, visiting relatives or neighbors, or shopping, as well as at school, at work, and so forth. Let's take a look at the following statements from another article from jw.org and see if any of the counsel was followed by Toni Morris. This particular article comes from the October 2009 Kingdom Ministry. Take a look at what's highlighted. It reads, when Jesus met the Samaritan woman at Jacob's fountain, he began the conversation by simply requesting that she give him a drink. Similarly, we may be able to start a conversation by making a brief statement or by asking a simple question. Carry with you appropriate literature in a small Bible. Be observant and take an interest in people around you. In view of the urgency of the preaching work, informal witnessing cannot be left merely to chance. We should be ready to take advantage of every appropriate opportunity to share the kingdom good news with others while there is yet time. None of this counsel was followed here, nor did Tony follow the example of Jesus, whom he calls his big brother.
I remember telling a friend of mine once where I wasn't treated too well in this particular branch territory, and I said to my friend, well, it's not me they need to worry about, it's my big brother.
He didn't represent his big brother well here at all. I can personally recall watching and also participating in demonstrations at local meetings as well as regional conventions and assemblies on how to informal witness out in public. Now, of course, we weren't taught to chase people down, but it's not like Tony had to recall a conversation starter from the back of the reasoning book here. The gentleman in the video actually gave Tony an opportunity to inform a witness here by initiating conversation. Tony easily could have given a witness, but I can imagine it'd be hard to give a witness when your cart is filled with booze.
Something very interesting happened when Jerry Jones called to discuss this matter of Toni Morrison and his liquor on Sunday morning.
And the person that I saw, it was Tony Morse, the governing body. The governing body was buying liquor 11 o'clock in New Jersey. And it disturbed me.
So that's the individual you observed buying the
Yes.
the alcohol?
Yes.
Of course, once again, just going back to the Bible principles of Proverbs 18:13, which highlights, anyone who replies to a matter before having heard both sides of the story, it could be foolish and humiliating for them to answer. So that, that highlights the principle that, really, we may see things one way, but we might not have all the details that go into the decision.
I agree with you there.
The gentleman who answered the call made a reasonable point. He would not make a judgment until he had all the facts. Quite reasonable. But how ironic that they take this reasonable position when it comes to Toni Morris, but not when it comes to people they call apostates.
Do not be quickly shaken from your reason when faced with what appear to be damaging attacks by apostates or other such deceivers of the mind, however plausible their charges may seem. 2 Thessalonians 2:2. Follow the advice given to the young man Timothy. Stick to the truth you learned, and remember where you learned it. Surely, there is ample evidence to show that you can trust the channel that Jehovah has used for nearly 100 years now to lead us in the way of the truth.
This Bottlegate scandal is not only exposing Toni Morris, it is exposing witnesses and their cognitive dissonance. It is exposing the Watchtower organization and its hypocrisy. When it comes to Toni Morris, be objective. Do not rush to judgment. Get the facts before you make a determination. But when it comes on to former witnesses who are presenting facts about the organization, members are told, do not listen. No matter how plausible it seems, dismiss it. Take what we say. Reject what witnesses say. Do not get the facts. Do not examine it for yourself. Just dismiss it. And that kind of brainwashing works, but not with witnesses who employ critical thinking. Unfortunately for the organization, that number is growing. Witnesses are beginning to think. They are coming to their senses and they are leaving the organization. And it will continue. What are they going to do? Because this thing is not sustainable. Maybe you're trying to make a link between the opening section of this video from Crisis of Conscience. This is probably the most disturbing aspect of Bottlegate.
We can not know the ultimate outcome for someone who has stumbled, so no wonder we're cautioned to be very careful to never be any cause for stumbling. Open up to Matthew chapter 18, and here's an especially powerful scripture in this regard. Matthew 18, verse 6, Jesus says, "But whoever stumbles one of these little ones who have faith in me, it would be better for him to have hung around his neck a millstone that is turned by a donkey and to be sunk in the open sea." Well, with graphic language, Jesus describes how that if we cause someone to become a spiritual casualty, we could actually bring eternal doom upon ourselves.
This scandal is not going away, and witnesses are watching. in spite of the organization's crusade to get them not to look at apostate material. Witnesses are being stumbled right now by the action of Tony Morris, even if some of them are living in denial. It is not enough for witnesses to exercise cognitive dissonance and try to live in denial. It is not enough for them to try to put a spin on it. It is not enough for the governing body and Tony Morris to hide behind the walls at HQ and not face the public. Witnesses are being stumbled by this. And as Stephen Letts said, you must never be a cause for stumbling, quoting the scriptures, their version. Tony Morris is causing witnesses to stumble. The Watchtower organization must give an answer. They must respond. They must do something about this stumbling. Another YouTuber gives a very interesting take on Bottlegate.
I don't feel bad for Tony. I don't. I'm never going to feel bad for a man that has the power to end shunning, which causes suicides, to end child abuse, which ruins lives, to end policies, flip-flop blood doctrines that kill people. I'm not going to feel bad for a man that has the power to do that, and yet he's off drinking.
This evil shunning policy led to the disfellowshipping of Raymond Franz, a former member of the governing body. They have no reservations about treating a member of the governing body as they would a rank and file member when it comes onto the matter of associating with someone who is disfellowshipped.
Aside from my initial shock of seeing this, what it made me think about is the important ramifications of their judgmental behavior. Those are the ramifications that those have had on everyday people. And it made me think of this court case that we just had here in Canada a few months ago, the Highwood, Alberta court case. And if you don't know anything about this court case, this is the case of a gentleman, I think he was a real estate agent from a place called Highwood, and he was having issues, I believe, with his daughter. She's a teenager, and I think the elders wanted him to kick her out or something like that. I don't know all the details of it, so I'm not gonna go too deep. But long story short, he ends up resorting to drinking. He's drinking a couple beers a night to try to deal with the situation. He's stressed, and so he gets dragged into the back room, and they decide to judge him, and they decide to disfellowship him, which means ruining his life, pretty much destroying his business, because all of his clients are witnesses, and this is their way of dealing with him, of course, typical. And so he decides this is ridiculous, so he gets his lawyer involved. He tries to basically get the courts to say that this judgment that he received was an illegitimate judgment, and that he deserves to continue to be a witness. Which is ironic that people still want to do this, even considering the amount of hypocrisy that's going on. But this is his situation. So he takes this court case all the way to the Supreme Court. And of course, I end up sitting there on CPAC watching.
How can it be that Franz is disfellowshipped under these circumstances? He was not a drunkard. He was not an extortioner. He was not an idolater. He was not an adulterer. He was disfellowshipped for having a meal with someone that the Watchtower, not God, the Watchtower deemed a wicked person. Someone who was in his heart, as you can see, a pretty good witness. It baffles my mind as to why these people want to hang on in this organization. If I were to put myself in their position, I'd want to be out. I don't get it. But even so, by their standard, not the Judicial Committee, but any witness who knew someone like this would not consider such a person a wicked person for living his conscience, a wicked person for not wanting to tell lies to witnesses. He is a wicked person. And for having a meal with him, Raymond Franz is disfellowshipped. for drinking, for having a drinking problem, a member is disfellowshipped, and the organization is prepared to go to court to fight their right to keep this person out with a drinking problem. How are they going to treat Tony Morris and his drinking problem? And if it is not a drinking problem, say it, because you are causing people to stumble. This organization will have to answer. Whether they like it or not, they have no choice but to answer. They will either have to answer the public, or they will need to answer unavoidably to witnesses. Failing that, they will certainly have to give an answer to God. Thanks for watching. Have yourself a wonderful day. Help keep these videos coming by supporting my home business. This allows me more time to concentrate on this ministry than an alternative means could afford. Your support could also lead to a healthier you. Free samples available to US citizens if you cover the shipping and handling. Log on to winstonstore.com for details.
May the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all.